Hey there, this is Andrew, and I'm going to go over the whole new TRG, or KeyForge Tournament Rules and Guidelines document that Ghost Galaxy published yesterday. And yeah, we're going to go through the whole thing. This is the first official rules document that I'm aware of posted by Ghost Galaxy. So uh, this should start to give us a picture of the shape of what they're trying to do with the game. We know that they want to make changes. Uh, some people are probably not going to like some of those, although I really think they're trying to make changes with the players in mind. They want everybody to be having a good time because then we stick around and buy decks and make the money. So they're kind of incentivized that way. Now, yeah, we'll go through. I was surprised by a couple of things in here, and my cat also surprised. And there's some stuff that I I haven't seen a lot of people talking about. So some stuff that people are talking about. Obviously, the if you're into Alliance, then the restricted list, which I already went over in a separate video, is the most interesting part. But there's a lot of other interesting stuff in here, and I will cover the restricted list again briefly in this video. So they start with a preamble about why this document is important. That's great, and yeah, there we go. So and of course the goal is to provide a framework for players and judges to be entertained. Yep, that makes sense. And it is interesting they give a nod to judges being entertained there. I have to say I enjoy doing judge stuff because I really like rules, but I prefer competitive play. Now, that doesn't mean I wouldn't ever just go to an event and be a judge and not play, because doing that sometimes sounds fun, but mostly I want to play and try to win. So it's just interesting. But I know I have friends who are not that way, who would rather, they really enjoy just showing up and judging and are very happy doing that most of the time. So anyway, just interesting to have that called out, and it's good to remember people are all different, and just because you like KeyForge one way doesn't mean that other people don't enjoy it a different way, and that we can't all be together and benefit from each other's presence in the community. So, um, yeah, okay. Wanted to make sure I was on the right mic. So, let's get into it. There's a bunch of definitions. Most of these are pretty uncontroversial. I'm not going to go over all of them, but they do differentiate between a casual tournament and an official tournament. The difference is an official tournament is administered under this document, the TRG, and it's organized by Ghost Galaxy or its designated tournament organizer. So, yeah, these are tournaments put on by Ghost Galaxy. They could involve going to higher level. They don't make a distinction here between like premier and cat really wants attention. They don't make a distinction here between premier and lower level official. It's just casual and official. So now they might add on like an official premier later or something, but anyway, that's the distinction they have here. Casual are administered under this document, but and they might even have Ghost Galaxy price support. I think Ghost Galaxy have been wanting to do a good job there. That's one of their goals, is to do a great job on price support for casual events. And these can use any format specified by the event organizer. And they've talked about this a little bit. If you want to do an adaptive event at your local store, even with something that's like GG price support, you absolutely can do that as an event organizer. So, so they're actually giving more freedom on this level, officially at least, than we had previously. But on the official tournaments, they're going to be restricted to those four that we've seen: Archon sealed, Alliance sealed, Archon standard, and Alliance standard. Okay, so the official tournament format, set of rules here, and Game rules, yeah, we know all that stuff. Um, Now, roles. It's interesting they distinguish between a participant. Well, I guess everybody is a participant, but also event organizers, event staff, and then players, judges, and marshals. And so they have this really clearly delineated here. And they do specify if you're a spectator and you see something, a breach of the rules in a game, you should bring it to the attention of the judge, but you shouldn't interrupt the game. You must not disturb an ongoing game. Now, I think at casual level, that might, it might be a little more normal to intervene, but technically you should bring it to the attention of a judge instead of intervening yourself. And certainly at a high level event, that would be, at an official event, that would be, you should talk to the judge, not intervene. Judges and marshals both could spend time not on duty and specifies they should make that clear. That's interesting. And something maybe that was in the old rule doc. I hadn't noticed it before. And judges are under the marshal. The marshal makes final decisions. That all makes sense. I think. And now there's nothing in here that says that a judge can't play also. And so that's interesting and good. So at like a casual level event, it might be typical to have a player who acts as a judge and then have like the event organizer who works at the store be the marshal. That I think would be a fairly typical setup. And in that case, the player who is knowledgeable about the rules will be making the judging calls. But if there's a dispute that arises, somebody can go to the marshal who probably isn't playing and get them to make a call. I could imagine having a marshal who's also playing, but you'd really just have to have everybody a high level of trust between everybody, because it could, at some point there could arise a conflict of interest, and they'd have to be somebody who would make the right call there. And yeah, anyway, probably better to have the final say, the marshal, be somebody not playing. But even that isn't said here. So, and they can also be a judge, but a marshal doesn't even have to be a judge. Okay, so if players have a dispute, they can't resolve it, they should bring a judge. If they if they disagree with the judge who's not the marshal, they can escalate it to the marshal, etc. There's a thing here on unsporting conduct, a section here. It's interesting. They specify poor personal hygiene. I know it's something people have complained about in other games before. I've never heard of that complaint in a KeyForge event, but it's good to have it on here. People should not smell offensive anyway. You don't have to smell nice, you just have to not smell offensive, etc. You should have non-aggressive, non-offensive behavior. That all makes sense. You can't stall. Don't stall. Do not do that. That's really bad behavior. Throwing game components, obviously. Intentionally trying to confuse an opponent. Yeah, that's important. I think as KeyForge players, we all have a duty to each other to try to make things clear what we're doing, and that would be bad behavior. I'm glad that's explicitly called out here. Disrupting a match in progress. Utilizing an electronic device to gain an advantage over an opponent. That's interesting. I can think of a lot of examples of that. I think they're probably worried about something like, having an earpiece where somebody's talking to you or something like that. But I wonder if this could include like electronic note taking, mishandling or intentionally damaging another participant's personal property. Yeah, that's important. Especially, it's interesting because, in KeyForge we cut. In adaptive or reversal, you would actually be playing the opponent's decks, but at official events, they're not doing those anymore. So, so you would have fewer opportunities to do this, but still good that it's on here. And of course, bribery or colluding. If you're, if you know that your teammate, you're playing against somebody who you care about personally, you want them to do well, and you know that you don't need to win this game, but they do, you can concede and help them out that way. But the moment you talk about it, the moment one of you talks about it as a possibility, that's collusion. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you think, I would just like to concede to this person, you can do it. That's totally fine. You just, the way you do it is you say, I concede. That's it. You do not say, would it help you if I concede, etc. That's not okay. So anyway, yeah, you can't do that kind of thing. You can't try to manipulate the tournament results by colluding with other participants or bribing them. Rules infractions. So it's interesting. This is a non-exhaustive list, so there are lots of things that could. Oh wait, sorry. Before I go on, I just want to say I noticed when I first read utilizing electronic device to gain an advantage over an opponent, what I initially thought was of electronic note taking, and so then I thought, wow, is there anything in here about note taking? And there's not, which is interesting because in the old FFG doc, note taking was not allowed. You can't take notes or reference material, reference outside material or information. So if you were going to sit there with a notepad and write down what the other player played, you could not do that. But you can actually now, according to my understanding of these rules. So now, of course, you would need to do that in a timely manner. You can't stall for time that way. But that is interesting that you can do that. As far as I know, there's nothing against it in this document, which I believe totally supersedes that other document. So I think note taking is allowed. Ask your marshal. All right. So rules infractions, gameplay errors like missed game steps, missed mandatory card abilities, failing to promptly correct an incorrect game state. Now, interestingly here, if you violate one of these rules infractions, and your opponent catches it, and you're not doing this, hey kitty cat, and you're not doing this on a constant basis trying to get away with it, then none of these things have to get escalated to a judge, especially if it's easy to correct the game state. So as a KeyForge player, if you notice your opponent missing something, just mentioning it to them is a great way to keep the game nice and friendly and working well. If a judge notices a missed game step, they might intervene and say, hey, you need to do that. And if nothing has to be rewound, then this might be what's down here, an informal warning. Very low friction, low effort, not a big deal. Some of these things like tardiness might be taken a little more seriously, absence at the start of a match, failing a deck check, which would mean that you have marked sleeves or something like that. Intentional slow play or ignoring instructions or warnings, cheating. These things are different levels of serious, right? If you fail to promptly, if you miss a mandatory card ability, that's much worse than cheating. Although, if you intentionally miss mandatory card abilities, that is cheating. So better to just do the right thing all the time. But mistakes will be made, and there is a difference between those things. All right, so penalties. None of this is shocking to me, so I really don't even want to spend a lot of time on it. Just don't do that stuff, and bad stuff won't happen to you. But judges and marshals can go so far as to kick you out, and the marshal can do that. And that's reasonable. It's good that they have that power if they need it. Okay. So you're responsible to bring your own stuff. If you bring, tokens, counters, everything. At official events, you have to sleeve your decks in opaque card sleeves. Opaque means that you can't see through it, and it really is going to be at the marshal's discretion in any event. Yeah, and the sleeves within a single deck have to be identical in size, color, texture, and condition. The condition's important because, um, you could have a sleeve that broke and then you put a new one on it, but it doesn't have dog ears in the same way that the other ones do, and that could be a problem. So you really want to keep the whole deck in sleeved in the same condition. Okay. Tokens, counter status cards, they have to be clearly distinguishable. That makes sense. You can use third party, that's fine. They have to be reasonable size and not unnecessarily obscure card information. And keys, this is interesting. Keys have to be distinct and easily discernible. And chain trackers have to clearly show the number of chains a player currently has. And you can't just pile, for official play, you can't just pile tokens on to the deck, which I sometimes like to do because that doesn't clearly show the number as easily. Okay, so maintaining an orderly play area, that's really important. I'll probably put out another doc or another video about clean play. There have been some good stuff published on that, but I'll probably cover it. Yeah, just keep things nice and neat, and then problems don't happen. Okay, this is interesting and perhaps a little more controversial. Going to time, this has changed. I think it's changed for the better, although it hasn't necessarily solved all the problems. Fundamentally, um, the reason games go to time, there's two reasons, but I find one of them is much more prevalent. The less prevalent reason I would say is because people have stally decks. Obviously, if somebody has like a Heart of the Forest deck and they're waiting to launch their combo off, but their opponent keeps disrupting it so they can't get to their combo, then you could go infinite turns and never have the game come to a resolution. So at the end of 45 minutes, time gets called, the game's over. Yeah, that can happen. But most often, what I find is that when games go to time, it's because one player is newer and struggling to keep up with play, and that's totally okay in casual play. At an official event, you don't want to see that. And so what I would say is if you're going to an official event, invest some time in practicing playing quickly because it's just going to be a better experience for everybody that way. I would rather lose within 45 minutes than win on time rules. So yeah, I think investing some time in playing quickly is really worthwhile. Again, casual level, this is just not a problem. And if you're somebody who gets upset because at a casual level somebody played slow and didn't finish, and you had to go to going the time rules, please take a step back and rethink some things because you're wrong. That said, nobody likes going to time. Actually, the new player probably would rather not be doing that either. And so at some point, it might be worth giving some friendly advice about practicing, avoiding analysis paralysis and playing quickly. Once people have some basic familiarity with the game, 45 minutes really ought to be long enough. Okay, so anyway, but when you go to time, here's the new rules, and I'll highlight where things have changed. So this hasn't changed. The player who's currently taking their turn finishes it. If they win that turn, game's over. Then their opponent takes their turn. If they win before the end of their turn, the game's over. Then, and this is a change, player one starts their final turn. They do step one, forge a key, try to forge a key, and that's it. They don't do steps 2 through 5. So if they forge during that forge a key step and that wins them the game's over. They won. And this removes some of the negative experience people would have where, hey, I actually would have forged. You had no way to stop me. So my last turn really didn't matter because setting up for that forge step didn't matter. So I think, and it also changes what the opponent does on their turn if they don't have to worry about you getting a forge a key step before going on to the tiebreaker rules. So Yeah, that's a change, and I think that's better. I don't think it solves the core problem of people playing slow, but uh, it's still better than the old way. Okay, then the tiebreaker rules kick in, and this one hasn't changed. Step one: each player who has 6 or more amber forges a key, removing the 6th amber from their pool. Cards that affect amber costs have no effect during the step. But it interestingly, this did change because Senator Shrix and Senator Brackus would matter here actually. So that's actually very interesting. Um, this implies that a Strix would work during this, which didn't used to be the case. So that's interesting. Uh, okay, then if whoever has the most keys wins. If there's still a tie, you go forward. Whoever has the most amber wins. If there's a tie, go forward. Whoever has the fewest chains wins. That's interesting and new. And then there used to be this step where you would figure out your potential amber, how much you could get from pips in your hand and cards on the board if you picked one house. Um, this is much better and simpler. The player with the most friendly creatures in play is the winner. That is much simpler to figure out. I like it. I like that change. And then if there's still a tie, you go to the first player as the winner. I don't think you're going to get that there very often based on all this. Um, Okay, then best of 3 matches. So it used to be that obviously if time is called on game one during game one, then you're just going to do the tiebreaker rules for that game, uh, and then that whoever won it is going to win. If time is called during game two, uh, you're going to well, okay, wait, doesn't say this here. If a best of 3 game, if a best of 3 match goes to time, both players of each one single. Okay, so if time is called, so it used to be if time was called during game two, the winner of game one just won. Now you'd actually do the tiebreaker rules for game two to figure that out. Okay, obviously if you go to time, uh, okay, if you go to time and you've each won a single game. So if you go to time during game one, you're going to do the tiebreaker rules. Whoever wins, that wins. If you go to time during game two, you're going to do the tiebreaker rules for that. If the same player won both games, they win. Otherwise, if you go to time during game two or game three, oh no, so I think if you're in the middle of game three, you're going to do the tiebreaker rules for game three. But if you're in the middle of game two, you're going to do the tiebreaker rules for game two, and then you're going to check who forged the most keys in games one and two. Yeah, got the most keys. Um, then you're going to ask, uh, if nobody has forged the most keys, you proceed. If then who had the most amber left over at the end of each game, uh, games one and two. Then who had the fewest chains at the end of games one and two. And so at the end of every game, you have to record how many keys each player forged, how much amber is left over in each player's pool, and how many chains each player has. So that's interesting. And then if you still haven't figured it out, then whoever won the first game of the match wins the match. So I think if you go to this, I think this only applies if you go to time in game two, because otherwise you go to game three. During game three, you would actually do this, but I want to ask. I actually don't know the answer for sure. Okay. Then it goes into official tournament formats. So we've covered these already in a separate video when the news came out with the overview of the formats, but this is a little more specific. So we'll go over what I thought was interesting here. So for Archon, this is Archon Standard. You bring a deck, you register yourself and your Archon deck. The Archon deck has to be complete and unmodified. That's not new. What is new is that these elimination rounds used to be Swiss. Swiss is better. Swiss is a better way to do things, but because they're doing these, and these are for official KeyForge tournaments. So just to clarify this, your local store can do things differently. Okay, but they're doing these elimination rounds, and then they're going to have second amber events. So when you get eliminated, doubly eliminated from the main event, you can go play in the second amber event. So elimination rounds continue until only 8 players remain, and they proceed to the playoffs. That all makes sense. But yeah, they're using elimination brackets. Again, I think Swiss pairing in general is very fun. The advantage here, two advantages, I guess. One is the having people who've lost twice go down to the second amber event. Probably keeps them more engaged and involved. We've talked about that, but because of the way they're doing prizing, I think it's actually better. And then the other thing is, for some reason, most people, in my experience, find brackets easier to understand. So that's probably a net improvement for new players. Okay, so then you have top 8. They get paired up, and then you're doing best of 3. Okay, Archon sealed. Everybody brings a sealed deck. They have to prove that it's unopened when they register. And they have 10 minutes before the first round to review their decks until the round starts. Now, there's an interesting thing here because back up here, yeah, I forgot to cover this. So what you bring to the event, you bring your Archon and your deck list card, and it says that your Archon card must be visible at all times during a match. That's kind of interesting. I don't think that means that the list has to be visible. Just that the card has to be visible, and your opponent can inspect the list prior to the start of a match. And this, but not during the match. But this is applying to sealed as well. And so this seems like a change to so that in sealed you have to present your deck list to the opponent and give them 2 minutes to review it before the game starts. That's an interesting change that I don't like. I disagree with it. I'll give you my basic logic here. Reading a deck list is skill testing. Playing around cards that your opponent might have but you don't know whether they have is also skill testing. Those are two different skill sets, maybe related, but they are different. And Archon Standard previously tested deck list reading and then not play around what your opponent might have because you know what they have. Whereas Sealed tested play around what your opponent might have, but did not test deck list reading. These are very different experiences, and I think that's good because it makes Archon and Standard and Sealed different, which is fun. They're different formats. They should feel different. They're skill testing in different ways, and that's good, I think. Additionally, not knowing what's in your opponent's deck can mitigate the randomness of what you open a little bit. It's possible to win with a worse deck in sealed. It's more possible because your opponent might play as though you did have a good card that you don't actually have. So yeah, I think for those reasons, I think it'd be better to leave it the way it was. But in any case, seems like it has changed. You will have to show the list, but you get 10 minutes yourself to study your own deck, and then you would present your list card to your opponent for 2 minutes before the game starts. The elimination rounds and playoffs work the same way. Okay, Alliance. So we've talked a lot about Alliance. The basics here are before the tournament, each player must create an Alliance deck. An Alliance deck consists of 3 house pods from up to 3 different Archon decks. So a house pod is a group of 12 cards dedicated to a single house within a single Archon deck. Each Archon deck always consists of 3 house pods of different houses. So, so an Alliance deck would have 3 house pods from up to 3 different Archon decks from the same KeyForge set, and each selected house pod must be from a different house. Additionally, each of them cannot contain more than 1 card by name from the Alliance restricted list, and that card can't appear in a greater quantity than what's specified in the list. But if you use a single unmodified Archon deck in an Alliance tournament, the deck that you use there is not subject to the Alliance restricted list, which is great. Okay, so, and then a couple things of note here. If the deck is constructed from Dark Tidings, you have to include the Tide reference card. If it's not Dark Tidings, it can't include the Tide reference card. If it's constructed from Winds of Exchange, it must contain exactly 1 token creature reference card from amongst the ones on the 3 Archons you constructed. Decks constructed from other sets cannot include token creature reference cards. All makes sense. It'll be interesting. Like, I could picture a world where you are doing a Winds of Exchange Alliance deck and you include 1 deck just for the token, and you take like the best house from it and then build other stuff around it, because you really want to pair this house from this other deck without that token into this deck with the token. That'd be kind of an interesting dynamic. I want to see how that goes. So then you have to bring the deck, and you have to bring all 3 Archon cards. When you register, you have to specify at HQ which houses you're using from which deck. So that's all consistent. If you are using a Winds of Exchange deck, you have to also register the token creature. So I guess they'll have to update the tournament software or have new tournament software to manage all this, because that's all not handled in Gem, certainly. Okay, and then when you play, you have to what does it say? I guess you'd have to hand over all 3 Archon cards, but I'm trying to see where it says that. I know it said that somewhere. That's okay. And then the same idea here, double elimination and then playoffs. In Alliance Sealed, the decks would have to be from the same KeyForge set, and you don't have to register which house pods you're using, and you can change them in between rounds. That's called deck calibration, and you can also change out which token you're using if it's a Winds of Exchange deck. One thing that is interesting to me here is that the restricted list still applies. So overall, the restricted list does not apply if you're just using a whole Archon card or a whole Archon deck. So you can break the restricted list if that's what your deck naturally has. But it's interesting to me that the restricted list applies in Sealed, because I would think you only have 6 pods to work with. Seems like it would be reasonable to not have the restricted list apply there, but they want it to, so that's fine. It will, but if you just use a whole deck, then it won't. So that's interesting. Okay, and then elimination rounds. You can switch out pods between your decks, and you can switch out the token creature. during deck calibration, and then playoffs work the same way. Okay, so and then quick coverage. Again, I have a separate video where I covered this, but I'll really quick cover the Alliance restricted list. Dark Amber Vault, you can only have one in a deck, can't have more. Ghost Form, you can have in any number, but you can't have it with any other card on this list. I guess they don't want you to be able to Ghost Form a Legacy Restringentus. Maybe they don't want you to Ghost Form Morpheus, but that seems less of a problem to me. Lateral Shift is on the list. So you can't have like a Legacy Library Access and a Lateral Shift, for example. Library Access is on the list. You can only have one. Library Card is on the list. You can have any number. So you could have a library card in 3 separate houses, I guess. But I don't think it's that good. But you couldn't have a library card with a Legacy Library Access. Martian Generosity. You can't have that with a Legacy Library Access. Restringentus. Yeah, Restringentus is on the list. You can only have one per deck, and you couldn't have it with, say, Morpheus. Morpheus is on the list, I think, mostly because of Restringentus. Time Traveler is on the list, so you can't have it with library access. That feels a little. I don't think that was a big problem to begin with. And United Action is on the list, so you can't do your Legacy Library card United Action, which really was going to be a problem. So that's that. Overall, I think this is good stuff. I'm glad they're being so clear. I'm interested. I guess I need to ask for sure to make sure I understand about whether you can take notes. And the other thing, yeah, I want to ask and find out exactly when the best of 3 tiebreak, how the best of 3 tiebreakers rules work. If those come into play if you go to time on game 2, or if they also would come into play if you go to time on game 3. And then oh yeah, Archon card or cards. So that would definitely mean in Alliance you have to present all 3 cards. That just makes sense. So don't need to ask about that. All right, that's that. I'm excited. I'm excited to just get to do a big event in person coming up soon, and looking forward to seeing a lot of great people there. People I know, people I don't know, lots of nice people. And getting to play a new set. That'll be in just over a week. So really looking forward to that. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you're excited too, and that you get out there and forge some keys.